Hi, I'm Rodney Johnson with Informed American, and I am thrilled to be here today with Frank Lasee, who has recently been appointed as the president of Heartland Institute. Frank's got more than a dozen years as a state senator in Wisconsin, so he's got a lot of background in politics, and he's going to be able to give us some input as to his views on what could make us better in terms of where we're going as a nation, and even talk about the upcoming election. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to you, Frank, and kind of tell us your view of some of the big things that maybe we could do better, right? Maybe the nation could do better or approach in a better way to move us where we want to be.
Well, I think one of the big things that we should do, Rodney, is work in the education area. And we really need to...
And when you say education, you mean like K through 12? We're talking about public education?
I think, Heartland Institute, we have an education reform area. That's one of the things we concentrate on.
Right.
One is school choice. I think people should be able to escape a government monopoly. We don't have government monopolies for the delivery of health care, for road building, for other very important things. When you drive over a bridge, it's some of the argument. It's too important for us to give choices to kids. And I think one is choices because people vote with their feet. It makes keep retaining your customers becomes much more of a priority if they can leave. So I think that's really important, and we've focused on it in that area. But what I've said, and I've talked about this for a long time, what our country desperately needs is what they do in Germany and in Switzerland to a really great effect, which is helping young people decide on what career they want while they're still in middle school and high school.
Okay.
And what happens in our country is hey, I'm really good at math. Well, good, go to college. But what am I going to do there when I'm, go to college, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And there isn't do you want to be a banker? Do you want to be a CPA? Do you want to work in science? Do you want to work in chemistry? What type of math? Investments, banking. I mean, all the different plethoras of what good in math is. We don't have any type of formalized system to have that student go and work in a bank, go to an investment firm.
Right.
And that's on the college side. And then you have somebody else who says, I really like tinkering with my car and I like building things and shop and I like working with wood. And they go to college. They don't say, well, let's explore that. Do you want to work on cars? Do you want to work on trucks? Do you want to fix machines? Would you prefer woodworking over that? Do you want to lay floors? Do you want to build houses? Do you want to put in cabinets? And help them so they can go right out of high school into a tech college with confidence and go into a tech college and say, you know what, in 2 years, I'm going to be a welder. And I know I'm going to get a job that's going to make $50,000 to $70,000 a year as a 20-year-old. It would change the dynamic of our country in so many different ways. And I think it would help in the battle I see that we have with the left, because a 20-year-old that's making $50,000 or $70,000 would be very different from a 25-year-old who's never made more than $20,000 in their life.
Oh, but this really flies in the face of everybody can be president.
Well, not everyone can be president, but in America, does anyone want to be president?
Right, exactly.
I mean,
that's a good
another
question.
I mean, oh my goodness. But we need all types of professions.
Right.
When your plumbing backs up, and plumbers make a great living. That's another one.
Yep.
You get a 25-year-old plumber who's doing well for himself. I think it would change the dynamic really. And the other part is with the demographics of the United States, we need to do things like this. We need younger people that whole decade earlier with skills that are saleable, usable. Businesses need them. The students need those, and it would help with the American dream. Get ahead in life.
We, as a nation in the early 80s, we went through this consolidation phase among businesses. And one of the things that businesses did to make more money was dropout training. We basically decimated training in the corporate sector. And so it became this thing of nobody wants to train the next group. And so what you're talking about, I think, is replicating like the German system where they have their technical training and their internship, where it's really a partnership between the government and businesses to say, look, you want these people trained up by the time they show up as full-time workers. And so when they're not 20, 21, 22 and flailing about and perhaps with student loan debt, but when they're 16, 17, 18, let's do this where they're continuing their education and working for Mercedes or Siemens or whatever in the afternoon, so that when they're 20, 21 and come into the workforce, they're trained up as a journeyman, right? They have the skill set you want to see with the guy on the floor. Is that kind of what you're looking at?
Rodney, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And the other part of it is that at that 16-year-old, you say, well, I want to work in finance. You say, well, let's go do an internship in a bank. That's really boring. I don't want to do that. I want something a little more exciting. Or I really love that. Do you want to be a CPA or do you want to work in corporate finance? I mean, where is it? And you get to explore some of those things. And one of the things I think that's really important with this is, getting to know. No, I don't like that.
Right.
No, I don't like that. I like that. And often I think we look at those as, well, no, well, I failed. Well, no, you didn't. You've got you one step closer to what you do like, so you can step forward with confidence. On both the college track and more on the tech track, we really need to get those skilled trades earlier and have more respect for them, I think is really important. So this is an area that Heartland is beginning to focus on, and we've gotten good feedback, and I think it's really important to our country. And that's really more of a state-based. I would say states and local school districts need to tackle this issue. I really don't want the federal government getting in. They screw things up in so many ways, and we should shrink the federal education department money we're spending federally and get back to the states and localities doing things like this that help regular citizens.
So let's discuss that for just a minute so that people understand. You say Heartland is kind of working on this now. What does that mean exactly? What's Heartland doing? Yes. And if people are watching this and they're saying, well, that kind of makes sense to me, I like that, what would they do to support it? How are you trying to get this from the idea of this is something smart we should be doing to an implementation phase of this is how we're rolling it out? That's my question.
Exactly. The Heartland Institute is really great. Go to heartland.org, and you can check us out there. And if you want to support us, you can donate there.
Okay. It's a think tank or
we're a think tank.
Okay.
Yes, we're actually a think and do tank. Some think tanks just
a think and swim tank.
Yeah, think and swim tank. Some think tanks just write nice papers and give you great ideas and well-researched things. You know, we're beginning to do that research on the German system, the Swiss system. Yeah. How would it work in the United States? Then looking for real policies that we can put into it that would actually work, and then marketing those policies to the states. And we're unique in the fact that we're spread across all 50 states and the national government. We have 4 publications we send out 10 times a year. Actually, we do polling every couple of years, and 80% of the legislators actually read our things, so it's a bipartisan group. And also 45% of the legislators say that our material actually influences their votes and their decisions. So we go out and we market these ideas. We have a government relations force that will go out, and when we get interest and a legislator says, I think this is a good idea, how could we have that, how could we work this? We'll give them that information, we'll supply them with experts, we'll send people to go and testify, and we will then educate on that issue. We are not a lobbying group, we don't lobby, but we educate on an issue, and of course we have some bent on our issue. We'd like to see this come into being.
Well, you got an outcome that you believe is right.
Yes, exactly.
So you're trying to inform and then change the hearts and minds of state legislators through research and analysis of what you think is going to do the best.
Yes. Okay. And we do it both at the state level and at the national level.
Right. So, education reform. Give me one other topic that Heartland's working on, and after that, we'll kind of handicap the election. So what's another thing that's kind of high on your list as the new president of Heartland?
The other area is healthcare reform. It is so important. It's 1/6 of our economy. I'm going to give a talk with your group here later about that, so we'll spend some more time on that. And it's 1/6 of our economy. It's $3.5 trillion of spending that we have, and it's a really important area. And also, we also have a sick care system. We don't have a system that's really set up to help us be healthy, stay healthy, and really we haven't designed the incentives into our system to do that. And more specifically, one of the areas that we're really focused on heavily, and we have a person who's fully devoted to what we call it is reforming the FDA. The FDA right now to get approval to sell a drug in the United States, it takes 10 years and $2.9 billion. And the big pharma companies have a stranglehold on this. They don't really want to see any change. And also, they don't want to push back against the FDA. The FDA is a regulator who gets to say yes and no over 10 years' time and $2.9 billion. And they have to interact with them a lot. So they don't want to ever go against the FDA. So they're not really excited about us kind of mucking in their world. But what we'd like to see is after drugs have passed an efficacy trial, a safety trial, to become widely available and to create a feedback loop so a doctor and the patient can try a drug that they think could really help that patient and then feed that information back into the system. And this, we believe, would also help take smaller startup companies and give them another avenue because they don't have the $2.9 billion in the 10 years to keep working on this. And this would give them another avenue to get to patients, get more information, and an alternate track, and allow the FDA perhaps to reform themselves more. I think that is far too expensive, far too long, And life-enhancing, life-saving drugs are not getting to the marketplace. And the cost that we have to pay for those when they get here is another tremendous problem. Right. So we're working in that area in healthcare reform overall. I think one of the other big areas that no one ever talks about, and I call it the 800-pound gorilla, and we'll talk about that more this afternoon, is that Medicare and Medicaid pay a fraction of what our health insurance pays for all services. And more than half of all services in the United States are paid for by Medicare and Medicaid. There is no other area that the government pays less than market rates for what they buy. It shouldn't be allowed. They wouldn't go out and buy tanks this way. You wouldn't buy bridges this way. Right. You wouldn't buy any other service and say, you know, we're just going to pay what we feel like.
That's right.
And but somehow they've accepted this. And part of it, I think, is it obscures the pricing relationship. How can you really get a true price of what a knee operation costs if you know that the government is paying 1/4 of the cost? And an example of that in Wisconsin, and it's hard to get this data, but it's factually, and it's there, for an uncomplicated birth in Wisconsin, Medicaid will pay about $1,600. $1,600. And an insurance company will pay $4,000 to $10,000 for the same birth, same hospital, same doctor, all the same services. And why are they paying so much? Because the government is paying so little. Right. And it's not right.
The real cost is in between.
Real cost is in between. And if our health insurance premiums, both for businesses and individuals, were 30 or 40 or 50% less, it would be easier for the insurance, it would be less costly, and it would also be more transparent. We're paying a hidden premium tax. Right. We are paying more for insurance because we are subsidizing Medicare and Medicaid. And that goes into this whole debate of Medicaid for or Medicare for all. Right. What does it really mean? Well, how would it work if you suddenly paid for medical services at 1/3 of what an insurance company pays now?
That's going to be a big fight.
Yeah, it's going to be real big.
Okay, let's move on to the election. And so I presume you think, as many people do, most people do, President Trump will be the Republican nominee, right?
Yes, I don't think that's going to change.
Yeah, exactly. It can be a fun conversation, but it doesn't look very likely, right? No. Unless something really unexpected happens. So that moves us over to the Democrat side. What do you think is going to happen? I mean, you know, Biden's got his health issue. Bernie Sanders has his health issues, and Biden has his Biden issues. And Senator Elizabeth Warren is kind of moving up. Do you see any of the dark horses kind of gaining ground, a Kamala Harris or, you know, Pete Buttigieg, or what do you see happening?
Unless the Democrats get someone from outside of who we've already seen, and
which seems unlikely.
Yeah, it seems unlikely. It's possible, but pretty unlikely, particularly after, you know, beginning of next year, which we're already approaching in the third quarter now, the first quarter of next year, this starts happening. If they aren't in the game and starting to go and do the primaries, there's no chance of that happening. Right. I think it's likely that we'll see Elizabeth Warren be the nominee, and it will be very interesting. I think that is who Trump prefers to run against. There's a lot of material there, and there's a strong contrast. I also think Democrats think she might be a good candidate, a woman, female woman, those sort of things, very liberal. Right. So it'd be a very interesting matchup. And, you know, of course, we have what's going on with impeachment and all these other things, and the media continually hammering Trump, but Trump doesn't seem to, you know, a normal person wear down under that type of attack all the time. He seems to be gearing up.
It does seem to feed him, doesn't it?
It does. So. Yes, it does. You know, some commentator I saw said, you know, I can just see Trump, you know, tweeting, sitting on the toilet, tweeting this out. They're going to hate this. And, you know, sending it out there. And it's like, oh, my goodness. But I think he does, you know, enjoy it.
Yeah, kind of feed it. Yeah. So say we move forward and we don't get anything explosive in any of the impeachment inquiries or whatever, and nothing terrible happens in Elizabeth Warren's background. You know, what we've seen is what we know, and, you know, perhaps a little bit more of the same. Maybe she said something else about, you know, getting fired, pregnant, whatever. It doesn't matter. But we kind of have this situation going into the nominations. The nominations are set, and then we get into the general election. What do you think happens? Do you think enough people have said, hey, I'm not really on board with some of Trump's, you know, perhaps not his views, but how he behaves, and so he loses those states like Wisconsin, and, you know, we become, you know, or Elizabeth Warren then gets the Oval Office, or do you think Trump wins? I mean, how it stands on the ground today.
You know, I think,
and it's not your preference, right? We're not talking about our preferences here. We're talking about
what I hope would happen.
Exactly. We're talking about what's likely.
I think a lot depends on where our economy is next year in September, October, and going into the November election. If it remains strong and gets stronger, and unemployment is real low in the African American community, historical 50 years lows.
Yeah.
I mean, you want a job, you can get a job.
Yeah.
I mean, there's more jobs than there are people willing to work.
Yeah.
I mean, and if that continues, I think that really goes in Trump's favor. I think it helps him a lot with regular working Joes and Janes. And if the economy is dipping and people are being laid off and things are not going well, I think that goes against Trump.
Mm-hmm.
There's some other wild cards. Does he cut a deal with the Chinese, or do the Chinese wait until after the election to see if they can get a better deal, or never come to the table? But their economy is hurting, and they're the second largest economy in the world. They kind of need us more than we need them, I think, is the underlying issue in that area. I was out in 2016 helping my Senate colleagues get elected. So I knocked on a lot of doors in Wisconsin, and it was really interesting because about every 10 doors I'd get the wrong house because I was working off a list of likely voters for our team.
Right.
And it would be usually a Trump supporter. Like, oh, hello, Mrs. Smith. Oh, I'm not Mrs. Smith. Do you know who you're going to vote for? Well, Trump. I said, well, really, that's interesting. Who else will you vote for? There are other people on the ballot.
Exactly.
I heard that
down
over and
ballot?
over again. Yeah, there's a down ballot. How would I vote for them? I'm like, it's all on the same ballot.
Right.
So they're new voters, and he attracted these new voters. And then I asked them the second question is, well, down ballot. And they said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, how would you know? And they over and over I heard, well, Trump will tell me. And I thought, well, that's interesting. How is he going to tell you? I'll know. That's what I heard too. He'll tell me. I'll know. And then I watched real closely, and Trump never really said it. But the people around him, his daughters, helpers, and others were saying, vote Republican, I need a Republican team. Vote Republican, I need a Republican team. But he wasn't saying that himself. So it was real interesting how he brought new voters to the table. He's going to need to bring more new voters to the table. I think he's lost ground with suburban women. Mm-hmm. I also think he's going to be making inroads into the black community. They vote 90% Democrat. I don't think that's real good for them. I think they're taken advantage of and ignored in many ways because of that solid Democrat vote.
Right.
And if they voted 80% for Democrats instead of 90% for Democrats, that would help Trump hugely in many of these competitive states. And that's, I think, a real possibility, because as much as the media hammers him as being anti-racist, the black community is doing better than its African-American community is doing better now than it has in many, many years.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we could see that play out as well. So on the other side, the really Democrat states, well, they're going to be Democrat states. This is the beauty of the Electoral College. It also, on that brief segue to that, it's in our Constitution, so you'd have to change the Constitution to do away with that. But could you imagine hanging chads in every ward in every state in the whole country, and having a nationwide recount, and then having nationwide court cases about California didn't do it right, and Louisiana didn't do it right, and oh my goodness. So, there's some beauty in what we have with the Electoral College, as much as the left would like to get rid of it. Mm-hmm. Part of it is that they can't run up the score in the big cities. It also encourages cheating on the popular vote as well, I would say. So it's interesting on their side, but they're going to have to win some of the states that Trump won, and they're highly competitive states, Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and now perhaps Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And there's, for the working class, the regular working class, I think there's a lot of like for Trump. I also think that there's a lot of people who will not say they support Trump because people jump down their throat for those who
don't
hate
attacked.
him.
Yeah.
And, there's also going to be those that hate or extremely dislike Elizabeth Warren, if it ends up being Elizabeth Warren, particularly because of her liberalism.
We got a horse race.
Yes, we do. It will be a horse race. It will be a horse race, and it will be, I would say, hotly, hotly contested.
Heartland.org.
Heartland.org.
All right. If you want more information, please give them a look. Thanks for your time.
Hey, you're very welcome. Thank you.